I realized that if I stayed in England, I'm not British. And that should be what you need to understand.
Meet Hian Goh, a Singaporean who spent 10 years in the UK before returning home to launch the Asian food channel, which he later sold for $65 million. Now he runs a venture capital firm managing near $1 billion. Hian shared why Singaporeans thrive more at home than abroad, how Singapore can stay ahead of its competitors in the next 10 years, and what it takes to live corporate life, face the struggles, and ultimately succeed in business. I'm Max Chernov, let's go!
What do you think the traits of Singaporeans as a society that actually helped Singapore to be like so successful as a country?
The interesting thing about Singapore is that I think people think that we are not creative or not bold, but actually I would argue that we are very creative and we're very bold. So listen to me about this. Like, one of the things I notice is Singaporeans is, and actually the government, right? We don't talk about this, but if you actually meet like the top people in the government, they're very first principle thinkers. They're like, we have to do this, this has to work. So I think that if Singaporeans are quite courageous in being able to make a U-turn, change policy, and just completely do something different, right? So a great example, and I'm trying to remember this from memory, but I have the book on Kuan Yew behind you, I should reference it. He was very against casinos. And the reason for that was because casinos attract crime, underworld, a lot of nefarious activities, and he did not want that in Singapore. Other countries in Asia would do that, not Singapore. We have to be clean, we have to be not corrupt. No casinos. Today we've got casinos. I think that what happened was he realized that Singapore had changed. Tourism was a core part of the economy. Casino gaming, entertainment was very important. We're going to have casinos. Complete U-turn. So fundamental in his thinking. No ego about it, right?
Yeah.
And then of course he says, okay, so then we're only going to have 2 licenses, we have this regulation. But then the infrastructure of how to regulate that policy decision, Singapore is very good at. But the leaders, historical leaders of Singapore were very first principle thinkers. I think we need to keep holding on to that first principles thinking, because we are not a big country and we are therefore a very pragmatic country. And so like a good startup, you always have to go back to first principles. So I think that actually, don't get me wrong, what happens is there's a lot of discussions behind the scenes. And one of the things I think Singapore, especially Singapore Inc., right? So be it the big corporations or the government, these conversations happen. I'm lucky to be witness to it. They ask for perspectives. I give it as bluntly as possible. I don't get shouted out of the room. In fact, I get, wow, that's very interesting. Thank you very much. Right? I don't get, oh, why you say that? No. They go, oh, okay. Very open. But this is behind the closed doors. Then they make a decision and then they execute it. So you never see that scene behind the scenes. And maybe the Singaporeans get a little bit paranoid. I don't know, how come no decision about this? I don't know whether, but then suddenly when we make that policy decision, it's very clear. You've seen this, right? It's very well justified. And then the press gets behind it. It's like we sell it to our people. That's the form of governance I feel like Singapore executes very well. It's very unique. I wouldn't recommend it to other countries.
Yeah. I think actually Singaporeans are creative, because otherwise, if you on a government level, you need to be flexible. And Singapore always changes something, tweaking something.
Yeah.
If you're just, okay, no, I know how it was. It was 10 years ago, 20 years ago. I know how it works, so I never change. No, but Singapore always constantly changing and making this way around, feeling what's going on in the world.
I'll make a controversial statement since we're on the Max Chernov show, which is that I think that in Singapore, and I think this is just the reality of it, so we should not judge it, is that we value intelligence very high. So we have a scholarship program. The best and brightest of the Singaporeans get public service scholarships, and then it goes to the best universities and they're expected to get first-class honors. And then when they come back, what happens is, because you're proven to be smart, intelligent, you're almost given a license to be able to make decisions, and you're almost like an anointed class. And this is called the scholar mentality. Have you heard of this? Scholar mentality, right? So when you walk into a job or civil service, people go, this guy, he's a scholar. and then discretion goes to him. So the pressure's on that person, him or her, because if they make a mistake, good luck, right? But on the other hand, that person feels very empowered. And, Singaporeans, we have this thing called scholar mentality, because sometimes people get very, when you're younger, you're insecure, very arrogant, or like, you're overbearing, you don't listen to people that well. So that's the negative side. But Singapore has got, I think, this sense of, if you're one of the few people who are tasked to actually be very brutally, intellectually excellent, especially when it comes to policy and governance, you have to execute it. So then the rest of the society, the challenge is, of course, this is the old way of thinking, right? I'm just saying, it's like, you're not a scholar, so you should not be making decision. So you need to listen to what the ruling class has to say. And I think we need to strike a balance, but that is historically, I think, the architecture of how we did that. It means that our leaders are highly intelligent, our civil service are highly intelligent. The risk is that we lose touch with everybody. We don't listen well. We don't actually understand the issues well. All I can say is, I think the current leadership is very different. Prime Minister Lawrence Wong, very different leader, right? Very different leader, empathetic leader. Yeah. And so Singapore is changing. But yeah, it's this idea that all of us just listens to, there's somebody out there making decisions. They're very brutal. They're very, very brutal. Yeah.
Before, when Singapore was building, by Kuan Yew and his team, like in the 70s, 80s, 90s, it kind of, people need to be maybe more, follow instructions more, versus now, because it's already there. Yeah. When you're just building something, you need to do it faster. But now it's the way already to ease up things. Yeah, probably.
You see, I think that Lee Kuan Yew was the original founder mode guy, right? The saying in internet, founder mode. I think Ryan Chesky said it. Super passionate about the project. Never, always there. And he did legendary things, right? He would ask the junior civil servant for the opinion, and then everyone's like freaking out, like, why is Lee Kuan Yew going down on the ground? Apparently, until the end of his career, and he still got a copy of the report of the Parks and Recreation Department. He would, when he walk around Botanic Gardens, he'd write down notes. He was so passionate, so detail-oriented. And I think Singapore in the 70s and the 80s, let's translate it to a professional capacity, Series A, Series B company, right? Just starting out, really needed the founder mentality, execution, do the vision. Today, Singapore's not that. Today, Singapore is a big diversified economy, of which half of the people who live here, yourself included, are not Singaporeans. Thank goodness for that. And we have gotten to a point in our country where the cost of living is high, right? So I was just looking at it. I mean, other than Switzerland or a few European countries, Singapore cost of living or average salary drawn is up there. And we can fuel that because we're always at the forefront of new things, either excellent manufacturing or innovative things, right? And so Singapore has done a lot of things, like, for example, in 1999, they put together A-STAR, which is the research organization. I spent some time with them. This past 5-year plan, $25 billion allocated to the overall research and development budget. And a lot of that kind of investment means that we can build innovative things and so on and so forth. So I think on that metric, we're doing well. And what is also more interesting is that Singapore now is becoming such a neutral place, right? You can have an Iranian, a Chinese, a Russian, Singaporean PhD all get together, do some sort of optoelectronic project at A-STAR. US used to be easier to do that. Singapore's got that, right? So that seems to work, but what is still something I think the society has to decide is the calibration as to how much noise, signal versus noise. And what I mean is like freedom of speech, right? So, in America, you just say anything crazy, and then other people go, he's crazy. Yeah, don't listen to him. And sort of like the free market of ideas proliferates up, right? And in Singapore, we don't do that, right? And we could spend a lot of time talking about it. And so I think that comes back from the history of where we came as a country, where it was very tightly controlled. But where do we want to be as a society going forward? If we want to continue to be at the forefront of innovation, we need to be much more open to many different crazy perspectives. And then therefore you'll have, crazy people. And I think we're still as a society, and I don't think we should be, but I just think from that perspective, that's where we want to be, right?
What countries or what places, what cities, the main competitors of Singapore right now?
I remember having a conversation probably about 10 years ago with folks in the government, and their position was very clear. It said, if ASEAN countries are strong, Singapore is successful, right? And so I do believe that Singapore now has got a policy of wanting to make sure that a strong ASEAN, a prosperous ASEAN, is a peaceful ASEAN, and we rise all together. So classic example is the Singapore Economic Zone. I think they did it because they know that we will need a hinterland of manufacturing at a different cost structure. And I think that they are prepared to make sure that foreign direct investment goes into Johor and Malaysia as much as into Singapore. So I don't really feel like Singapore is in competition with people, but Singapore continues to be obsessed about being competitive. Does that make sense?
Which is a good thing.
Which is a good thing, right? What we choose to do, we have to be best at. But we don't necessarily want to look at other people and be competitive. So I give you an example, right? So if you're going to be good in AI or something like that, I mean, you're not fighting against an Asian country per se. You're fighting against everybody else with incredible things. And you've got to pick exactly what we're doing. And then what you do is you decide, okay, it may be we're not going to be able to build the best large language models because we don't have a billion people's worth of data or the world's data on social media. Maybe we won't be able to do like a SaaS application because our market is relatively small. But it turns out that, I don't know whether you know this, Max, that the semiconductor industry as a percentage of GDP of Singapore is bigger than tourism. It really is. And Singapore makes something like 11% of all the supply chain of the semiconductor equipment, so the people who make the equipment that goes into the fabs and things like that. And in the case of semiconductors, the aim is to be globally competitive amongst Japan, Korea, America, Holland, and everything else. So Singapore is very good at being competitive, but I don't think Singapore is in the business of being in competition with ASEAN countries, with China, with America. And that's why I'll state for the record, right, that we are close to, for example, America, right? Our defense equipment's all from America. We are as close to China as we can. But we as a country are very clear. We're not going to say we are an ally of America. And I can say this to you because I was at a Forbes conference. We had some reporters say, as an ally of America, and the then designate Prime Minister Lawrence Wong on stage says, I just want you to be very clear, we are not an ally of America. We do business with America, we act in our interests. If we can do business with you, we'd love to, but please, you're a reporter. Let's set the record straight. We're not an ally of America. Like, think about it, right? You're a small country. If you go to America, you ask people, is Singapore an ally of America? Oh yeah, we depend heavily on our countries, but we're not an ally. So I think that's a very unique thing I want to sort of put out there in the world. The longer you stay here, the longer you realize it's such a unique country. So we're very misunderstood that way.
Do you think it shaped you as a Singaporean when you stayed for many years in UK? It shaped your personality?
Absolutely.
And now you're maybe more flexible with different people, different nationalities.
Yeah, so sometimes after a while, especially when I meet people overseas, I give them a warning. I say, by the way, I'm not like the typical Singaporean, right? Do not, just because you met me, you think that you met Singaporean.
What's the typical Singaporean?
Oh, typical Singaporean like this lah, Hey Max, what you do here, very impressive. Yeah, you come here, you do by yourself. Not like us lah, we just listen to instruction, but we do good lah. We do good, instruction very good. But then if there's no instruction, I feel a bit panic lah, so not like that Hian Goh, anything also can do. Wow, very interesting. That's like the Singaporean side of life, and the DNA is there. But if you want me to comment about Singaporeans, I mean, what's the perspective you want me to get? Like, did it shape me? Yeah, I almost feel like I had this realized after 20 years what my true mission is. And my true mission is to change Singapore society by my own actions, right? Be it being an entrepreneur or being a venture capitalist. Really just showing that Singapore should have the ability to understand risk and take risks, right? So this is very important to me. What do I mean by that? Well, it turns out that if you're risk averse, that might not be the best risk-taking strategy, right? If you don't take risks, you miss the opportunity, you get left behind. But then on the other hand, because of the history of Singapore, because of the fact that our forefathers, Kuan Yew, always said, we are a small country, we can't take risks. So we have to be very risk averse. Certainly my generation, people 50 years and above, right, have that mentality. So when I became an entrepreneur, a lot of people just were very concerned. My father was very concerned. Why are you doing that, right? But when I sold, Asian Food Channel 10 years later, and I made some money, it was very interesting. The first reaction from Singaporeans was, really? You made money here? Really? Sure not. Because initially, we were under NDA, and so, Food Network, I sold it to Food Network, right? They said, you can't really tell how much you sold it for. So I started walking around the entrepreneurial ecosystem saying, hey, I'm an exited founder. I would like to, invest and help. And people go, oh, you sure you got money or not? Because they never said how much he sold, right? So there's really this disbelief, right? And this was in 2013. And then one day Food Network released in their annual report, right at the end, page, 356, that we had sold it for $65 million in cash. And so everyone was like, wait a minute, you could actually make money, right? Okay, I mean, I didn't keep all 65 million, of course, but enough to be dangerous. And so just by the act of doing that, I think you change people's perspectives. So you can talk about it all day long, but if you don't do it, that's the best way of actually changing society. So then we invested in Chope, we invested in Red Mart, I invested in Love Bonito, a really good example, right? Like two young ladies who, don't have world-class degrees, but really are super focused and profitable and doing a good job. Nobody really paying attention, giving them capital. Now there is such a big company. Like those success stories, if it's myself or it's other people that we back as venture capitalists, all of that I think is just going to change society and change Singapore society. So I was thinking about it. I think perhaps looking back, that's always been my mission, right? To just realign, right? To make sure that Singapore has the right place in the world. But ironically, and this is, Max, you probably relate to this, I think you guys have a totally different view. I mean, as in non-Singaporeans, have a totally different view of Singapore, right? Singapore is amazing, Singapore is cool, Singapore is advanced. And then the Singaporeans like, oh, I don't know, man. And we still have that imposter syndrome. We need to change that. People don't view you like that. And then you view yourself like that. It's just... yeah, it needs to be changed.
It's interesting because, for example, the typical foreigner in Singapore, if we talk about expats working on in corporations, it's more, for example, you go to play a paddle game, there are 4 people.
Yeah.
There is a high chance that 4 of them, or at least 3 out of 4, will be working for some corporate job. Because I'm not engaged corporate job. It's not, for example, for me as an entrepreneur, it doesn't resonate that much. So what I mean by that, Singapore attracts people because the corporations are so established here.
Yeah.
It attracts more corporate, maybe minded people.
Yeah.
And it maybe so it's from foreigner side, but maybe translates also to Singaporeans. So it's more huge corporations. Some of them, they run by government or owned by government. So that's why the environment is not so startup-y or not so,
Yeah. So what you're saying is that actually a lot of the people who are the expats, of which increasingly I think is roughly around 50%, are kind of like people who don't mind this very structured, productivity versus creativity, right?
I mean, it creates the environment. If you're
you
walk into the room and it's 10 entrepreneurs from different industries, then it will be energy, creativity, ideas flowing. And if it's nothing against, I have friends, good friends, I also from corporate world, so nothing against it. It's just the vibe the vibe is different.
So actually, you're probably right. It's a good point you raise. And I don't feel it because I always joke that I live in a bubble of entrepreneurial people, right? So my job as a venture capitalist, you always just meet people who are slightly crazy, right? You never meet all the corporate people. I'm sure there's probably a lot. Just like you're in Hollywood, if you're a casting agent, everybody's like good looking. And you think like everybody in the world is good looking. So you're probably right. I think you're absolutely correct. But the point being is maybe what we should debate or what we think about is to what extent should we have contrarian thinking? What extent should Singapore as a society have a tolerance for truly wacky and out there people, right? Is there a place for that, right? And of course, the ultimate place is, I would argue it's like Berlin or America. I think first and foremost, if you are that person today in Singapore, and especially if you're a Singaporean, I think the most important thing now is that society actually does give you a certain value and status. So I think that's very important. So what do I mean by that? So 10 years ago, I mean, this is like max, this is like base layer. 10 years ago, if you told your father that you wanted to be like a chef, right? Because I did Asian Food Channel, he'd yell at you like, what, you want to be a cook? Like the hawker guy? But of course now it's like, oh yeah, I want to be like a celebrity chef or the restaurant. So today, if my kids say, hey, maybe I want to pursue a career in F&B, I won't judge them. I won't say, oh no, you should work for MNC, you should have a good pay, you should, save money. So I think the number of avenues for which Singaporeans can do things have increased, right? So that's phase one. So I'll give you a specific example, right? So one of my kids goes to School of the Arts, right? And it's a deliberate decision because she's really good at writing. She could have gone to a top Singaporean school, but I wanted her to have that education. But what's interesting is that when she tells her friends that she's at the School of the Arts, a lot of times you go, oh, so you didn't get that good PSLE grades. And it really pisses her off, right? And then I get a chance to deprogram her. I go like, honey, that's the Singaporean perspective. What are you going to do? What are you going to say? What's the narrative? What's the confidence that because you've got to stand up for your decisions. And then, there are certain Singaporeans who today, if you're good in the arts and you're good in the sports, you're celebrated. So I don't think that was the case as little as 15, 20 years ago.
Yeah.
So we are changing as a society, and I think we're in the right trajectory. Now, are we, so extreme that we are able to handle all the different, like fully, drugs and, vice and all that kind of completely free market things? I don't think Singapore should do that, to be honest. But we should be, as a Singaporean, celebrate excellence. And if you're an excellent sailor, if you're an excellent dancer, if you're an excellent writer, it should be like you go to a dinner party and people talk to you and say, oh my gosh, you're amazing, as opposed to, dancer, how much money you make? You actor, not that much money, leh. Why you do that? Such a waste, you're very smart, no? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, we gotta change that. We gotta change that.
Hian is such an amazing human being and entrepreneur, and I learned a lot from people like him, so it was incredible to sit down with him for an hour and a half and listen to his stories. And also, because I ask questions as entrepreneur myself, I get advice from this level of people, which is incredible. And we talk about how to switch from corporate career to business. And for me, it makes complete sense. Until 2014, I was in a corporate. I was in P&G actually doing marketing in Procter & Gamble, managing Gucci brand, perfumery brand. But I always wanted to start something on my own. So eventually, more than 10 years ago, I quit corporate and start my own projects. And I've been doing online marketing since then. I've been doing a lot of content creation, a lot of online sales, direct marketing, affiliate marketing. I know this stuff. And yeah, of course, it was challenging. It was a lot of ups and even more downs. But when you figure out how it works, it makes your life so much better and so much flexible. So from 2014, I was able to live in Spain, in Ireland, in Singapore, in France, doing my business remotely. So I was really flexible, which is amazing. I don't have to go to any office. So now for me, it's like a dream job. And I go to places, I go to China, India, Philippines, Indonesia, of course, Singapore. I interview people, and oftentimes my guests, my interviewee, ask me oh man, how are you doing this? Oh, how much money are you making? It feels like a great job.
And yeah, it's a great job. So I decided to create a guide where I explain my way, my approach. It's not the only way, but it's my way. So how to live corporate world, how to live 9-to-5 job, and how to start your own projects. Making money online, like being able to work remotely, to travel, and be happy with your life, be fulfilled with what you do, making a good amount of money every month. So the guide is not ready yet, I'm working on it now. If you want to get it, it's a very short Google form, just fill it up and you will get a notification when the guide is ready, so you'll be able to get it. So link in description below, go get it, and back to the video. I love Singlish, but one of my best friends actually is Singaporean, Andy Lim. He lives in Singapore, but he's doing business in India for a long time, 20 years. And he showed me this clip from Kuan Yew when he say, okay, you guys don't speak Singlish. So it's like one of the biggest thing about Singapore. At the same time, I guess people sometimes shy to talk in Singlish with heavy accent.
Yeah. Oh, I love Singlish.
Yeah.
I love Singlish. But the point was valid. I think you're referring to a very famous speech probably in the 80s or 90s. In fact, I just recently saw that clip for some reason, and it was sort of like, people would judge you for your tone, just speak and be judged for your content. And it's true, right? I mean, Singlish. But then, of course, now, I don't know, Max, you find Singlish cool?
I love Singlish a lot.
You love Singlish, but
yeah. At the beginning, like maybe my first half a year in Singapore, I don't understand much. Maybe 50% of the content I just missed. But then I start liking it. I don't know, it's addictive. I like how
it's very efficient language.
Yeah.
Right?
Very short, very efficient.
So I'll give you an example, okay? This is my favorite line, right? Because you and I, we were talking about how to do things, how to do business. And when I watch somebody, say for example, I watch a speaker on stage, right? And he's not that good, right? But everyone's clapping and, he's getting paid. And so the thought that goes into your mind is, wow, what would you say? It's like he's faking it and he's making it, right? There's a great Singlish word for that. I'll give it to you in full-blown Singlish, right? Are you ready for this?
Let's do it. 3, 2, 1.
Like that also can. Right? So, like that is like that. Also can means also can. And actually it's Chinese, right? 这样也可以. So Singlish is
direct translation.
Direct translation. But, what you're saying is, wow, that guy, he's doing it like that. And he still can be successful. And so Singaporeans, we like to say, wow, you trade crypto, you make money. Wow, like that also can. And I use that because what does like that also can mean? It means that honestly, that the bar is so low. Why are we Singaporeans not able to take more risks? Like that also can. So I like saying that to people, Singlish word of the week. Yeah. Like that also can.
Episode every week.
Yeah, every week. Good evening,
You picked up a proper British accent?
I have a proper British accent. I have South London British accent. I have Ali G British accent. Yeah, you want me to give you?
Yeah, you can code switch?
I can still switch. I have capabilities. A lot of people tell me I have capabilities to imitate many different languages, many different accents.
Okay, so can you tell me, in the British way, British accent way, you spend there from what age to what age?
I'll give you the South London British accent. Yeah. Okay, it was very hard to perform in. Yeah, in it, it's been 10 years. Been thinking about it. Maybe I should go back to Singapore. You know what I mean?
Yeah. You know what I mean, mate?
Yeah. So it's a bit like that. It's a bit shorter. Yeah. Bit street. And that's how they spoke in South London. Of course, then I think I have a neutral accent, but yes, you could also speak like this. It's perfectly fine, And when you went to Oxford, a lot of your tutors would be, right, Max, what did you think about this week's topic? I found it fascinating, really incredible.
Yeah.
And then, of course, when I worked in investment banking, I actually worked for European Bank, SG Warburg. Once you meet a lot of Germans, and they speak like this, and here, this is good. Yeah, you should totally do this. Yeah. So I have like a French accent, and of course I work for an American investment bank, and so actually that's like there's so many different accents in America people don't realize. Like a Singaporean, you only go to like New York and San Francisco, you can go down south and it'd be like, yeah, y'all come back now, it's a little bit slower. Yeah, Max, what are you doing, bringing all these wonderful perspectives. It's very interesting. Actually, that's a terrible, but that's Singapore. I've lost it. You're making me nervous in front of the camera.
I love it, man. I love it. I remember your impersonation of Donald Trump on the boat.
It's gonna be great. Yeah.
That's my favorite.
What was it say? Like, Singapore, they're not an ally. That's what they say, but we love them. They're so good, You gotta make America like Singapore, out there, it's so clean. I went there, everyone was like, wow, it's so clean, so polite. They're not like China, right? But you gotta do the arm, you gotta really feel the person, right? So when obviously I've done a lot of TV work, and you meet so many talented people, you meet actors, so it kind of rubs off, and it's great, It's so amazing. Like, look at this place. Wow. I was like, here, there. So fabulous. And you just got to remember some of his words. So.
No, man, it's impressive. I love it.
Humor is very important in life, Yeah. It is funny, right? Because, like, I can give you the whole spiel, right? We run $800 million. We're a big company, right? Sexy venture capitalists. But if you don't have humor, you cannot really relate to people, right? And when you have disarming humor, and I find that it's helped me a lot in life to really relate to all people from all different cultures, right? Yeah. I think that's the strength of Singapore. Right? We've always never really been too judgy about perspectives, right? Yeah. I hope so, right? At least not for me.
So you stayed 10 years in UK, and then you ever wanted to stay there, to continue staying there, or how you decided to go back to Singapore?
That I can tell you a great story about this. I was working for a bank, investment bank. I got the job, my dream job. I'm doing all the financial analysis, right? And in the late 90s, especially in the industries that we were focused on, I hadn't done the tech industry yet. I was in like chemicals industry. The British chemical industry was going through a tough time, right? Companies like ICI, their factories were big, but when Saudi Arabia makes you a bigger factory and the Gulf of America makes a big factory and the cost structure of everything goes down, these companies needed to be restructured and specialized, and ICI became from a paint company to like a specialty chemicals company. And bankers, right? If you work for a banker, right, Max, you need to go to the CEO and you need to tell him the truth, which is your company is screwed. You need to listen to us. We need to sell half of it. You need to take a loss. You need to manage your shareholders. Not a message a CEO wants to hear, right? So I would do all the analysis, right? And when it's time, I saw this analysis, okay, and when it's time to meet the client, what do you think happens? Like the British guy comes, and then it's always like a younger British guy called Aaron or something like that. He goes, oh, Hian, can I get the analysis? Thank you very much. And they take the analysis and you go see the client. And when you're a banker, you want to see the client. You want to see the action. You spend 3-4 days. And I said, that's racism, man. It's like, how come I don't get to meet the guy? But my thinking was wrong. It's not racism. It's racial perspective. Do you think a Singaporean going into their room telling a British guy, like, Sir Malcolm, that his company is in trouble, do you think that's going to sell, right? So I come to the conclusion that the world requires an understanding of cultural perspectives, right? And so I realized that if I stayed in England, I'm not British. And that should be what you need to understand. So if you want to get into a decision-making position of a country and a culture, my argument was my best bet was I got to come back home because I have a fighting chance to, go up to a place where I can make a difference, but in my country. And it was a difficult decision, but I came back in 1999 with, Solomon in those days, and I was a tech banker, and then I've been here for 20 years. I think that decision was correct, but you can see how the perspective is, these people, they're against us, these British people, they don't want the Singaporean, they're going to hide the Singaporean guy. I disagree. You got to do business. And one of the great things about Singapore, I think, is we can go to any culture in the world. We're not judged at this point in time, right? We're not this big 1 billion Chinese country. We're not an American. We're Singaporeans. We just want to turn up and do business. We're very good. We can make your place faster, better, cheaper. You come, you put your money here. We'll be safe. Our laws are very strong. It was like, yeah, this is great, right? So that's why I didn't stay in the UK. And what was very lucky was that Singapore became what it was in 1999 to what it is. And so I invested in a stock called Singapore Inc. that has done very well.
You were a banker for some time.
Yes.
And then what was the story? How you decided to start it was your first business or no? Asian Food Channel?
No, Asian Food Channel was my third business, right? Okay. So I financed Talking Cock the film, which was like another story, but it didn't do well. And I went to China. I tried my hand being in China because the other theory was, since I look Chinese, maybe I go to China and do it. And I think I could have done it, but I just wanted to come back. And then I started Asian Food Channel. But the reason why I became an entrepreneur was because I was very lucky to meet what I think was somebody very pivotal. And he unfortunately passed away. He's a gentleman called Mr. Sim Wong Hoo. So you remember Sound Blaster, the card, right?
Yeah.
This was a Singapore company. We made Sound Blaster, and Mr. Sim had 60% world market share of Sound Blaster, and at $32 a share price, I still remember this. He in 1999 was worth more than the company was worth more than $1 billion. Creative Technologies was the original unicorn of Singapore tech ecosystem. So he was the number one client in 1999. I was on the desk with Solomon at Tech, and we had access, and then we started being the principal banker to Mr. Sim Wong Hoo. And that was a very, very important time in my life. I was around mid-20s. And, look, my perspective, right, was like, law degree from Oxford, this, that, Raffles Institution, blah, 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 like everything. Mr. Sim was, I think, poly graduate. Nobody really gave him that much support. He did it all on his own. And I remember sitting down at lunch and he was debating whether to buy like graphics card company, like Diamond 3. He never said NVIDIA. Can you imagine people that are And I was like, wait, aren't American companies supposed to buy Asian companies? Why is this Singaporean company? Yeah, I think I'm going to buy Diamond S3 or maybe ATI. And it really blew my mind. And then I just, I'm going to say this. I just said, you know what? He's smart, but he's not that smart, right? He's not like rocket scientist, but he's got balls. So I said, that's the difference. The difference was Mr. Sim who had balls, he had daring, he had vision, and I didn't have it. I was mid-20s banker, go to British public school, do well, go to Oxford law degree, do well, do banker. That was the day I decided, you know what? I've been blessed with having resources. My parents have their own house, their own middle-class life. I don't need to support them. What are you going to do, Hian, to move yourself to the next level? And it meant that I had to go become an entrepreneur. And then what I did was I really became an entrepreneur. I packed my bags, I went to Guangzhou, China, and I set up a call center with an ex-client of Solomon, and I just relearned my Chinese. And that was what inspired me to be an entrepreneur. I financed Singapore film, right? TalkingCock.com. Yeah. We didn't do well because the distributor took all the revenues, and rightfully so. After the theatrics and everything, very little for us. And I actually didn't do well for my investors. But the most important thing was that failure, right? And I want to talk about that. It's actually a setback. The lesson I learned from financing a Singaporean film is it's very hard to really make money as the content creator, at least certainly in those days. Now it's very different. You should be a distributor. And then when I went to business school at INSEAD and cable was going digital, and I love food, I still cook. My Instagram handle is Hian Can Cook. Yeah. I was like, how come we don't have a food channel? I studied the business model. It's the second most profitable business model. The first one is the weather channel. Asian people love food. Why aren't we doing it? Control distribution. From controlling distribution, you know what is popular, and then you control the whole thing, you can make money. So if I didn't finance a film, I wouldn't have learned that. So coming back to the Singapore narrative, and I always tell people now, people always say, the path towards success is littered with failure, right? Why do I say it is mandatory for you to have failure before you have success? Mandatory. If that is the case, then a fear of failure means a fear of success.
Yeah, yeah.
How are you going to be successful if you haven't got failure? So the question you should be asking is not whether you're going to fail, but can you afford to fail? Right? Because if you can afford to fail, then it's not failure, it's setback. If you jump out of a plane, your parachute doesn't work and you die, that's called failure. If you break your leg, it's called setback, right? I think most things in life are actually setbacks. They're not failures. And to be honest, I try not to do the things that have single points of failure. So I've never jumped out of a plane before. We as Singaporeans need to get better understanding risk reward. If the risk is high, but the reward is also high, say for example, it's a 30% chance, right? If you start up a company and you have a 30% chance of becoming very successful, that means theoretically, if you do it 3 times, the probability is like 90%. Can you afford to do this 3 times? Well, I did the first company, wasn't successful. I financed a film, wasn't successful. I went to business school. And at that point of time, I was very close to giving up. I was like, oh, and then, the bankers started calling like, hey, maybe you should go back and work for Citibank. And then I came up with this crazy idea about Asian food channel. And half of the people said you should do it. And half of the people, including at that point of time, some of my family members said, no, Hian, come on, don't do it. It's like, just, you've got the money. And I don't know, I just said, yeah, I'm going to do it. And I did for 10 years and I almost lost the company during financial crisis and I was successful. I was resilient enough to journey 3 failures or 3 setbacks because I, didn't have a mortgage. I was willing to sleep on the couch and my parents were okay. But along the way, you see your friends become like private equity professionals and making good money and you're still living out a rented flat. But that creates resilience. That creates the tenacity. So I think that's what Singaporeans need to understand. If a risk is worth taking and you're not going to die from it, we should really sometimes do it. And when you're on your deathbed, and you always see that on the internet, I think you'll remember that. I think you remember that was honestly something that was the correct thing to do.
What was the lowest moment in your life or in your business career?
I speak very publicly about it. It was divorce. Divorce, right? And I was running Asian Food Channel. I think it was 2010, and gone through financial crisis, right? And I think those 2 years, every month around the 23rd, you got to make payroll. If you don't have the money, you got to call your customer, please pay me. You got to borrow money. You got to raise funding rounds. And I think we raised at least 4 or 5 rescue funding rounds. And it's just tough. And I remember one time I looked at my passport. I think I was on the road 242 days a year. And then one day my ex-wife, God bless her, I don't judge her because I can understand why. But she just came in and said, I don't love you anymore. I don't know who you are. Who are you, right? And then we separated, right? So you can imagine, right? Shitty television company, struggling, financing not under control, and personal life just completely destroyed. So that was the lowest point, yeah.
So how you overcame this thing?
Smoking a lot of cigarettes. Really, I would wake up in the morning and I would drag myself, because you still have to go to work. I would have to smoke 4 cigarettes before I could even function. 4 cigarettes and 2 cups of coffee. I have a lot of empathy for entrepreneurs because these kind of things happen all the time. I think when you go through that, one of the most important things was you question every single strand of your body about what is the point of this, right? And I'll tell you this, right? And you probably can tell, underlying this, I was a young guy. I was a really angry guy, arrogant guy. Everybody, I see some entrepreneurs now, they have that energy. I don't blame them. When you're a guy who hasn't succeeded financially, you're insecure, right? Or you haven't finished your mission, you're insecure. Everything to you is a threat. Think about living with a guy like that. Do you think that's a good person to spend time with? So you really had to think about that. And I think the reason why I talked very publicly about that relationship breakdown was it was an incredible moment of rebuilding, right? So good friends, talked to for a long time. Actually having somebody to walk you through it. I had a therapist walk you through it. And to be very specific, the challenge in those situations is you're feeling many different emotions, right, Max? You're feeling angry, you're feeling betrayed, you're feeling sad, you're feeling, how many other feelings you can have? When you have 5 or 6 different feelings going through your brain, it's like a short circuit. And so my sister told me, she said, the only way to do it is to process each feeling. When you're sad, cry until you can't cry. When you're angry, punch something. Don't punch somebody, but punch something, right? Get it out of your system. And I think when you go through trauma, it's about peeling. I don't know about you, but it's like peeling those emotional layers. My divorce taught me more about who I am than any other lesson in my life. I always thank the universe and God for giving me that horrible, challenging thing. I like myself more after going through that. I always believe the low points are as important as the high points in your life.
Do you remember your I made it moment?
Yes.
When you sold the company?
Yes.
Tell me about it.
It's when I got money in the bank account.
Do you remember that day when you got like this one transaction?
I'll tell you the
one
story.
transaction?
I'll tell you the story. Yeah, one transaction. I always say value creation and value extraction are 2 different disciplines. So I'm making a company, right? I'm making Asian Food Channel after like 7-8 years, financial crisis, come back now. I've got great customers. I have DBS bank customer. I make TV shows, everything like that. Now it's time to sell the company because at that point of time, we didn't have the additional capital.
So the model, just a bit details. The model was you had this 24-hour, 7 platform, the TV channel, and then your business model was to sell advertising.
Yeah. So in the cable TV business, when you watch Discovery, you watch Disney, you watch Food Network, some percentage gets bought by the cable operator and some is from advertising. And so in our business, actually the cable operators don't pay you that much money, not like HBO or whatever. You take that because you get the audience and then you can sell advertising. So it's actually a very interesting business model. So that was what we were doing. So we're now at about 2010, 2011, and people started knocking on the doors, like Food Network saying, hey, we're now interested in Asia. Discovery, hey, we're now interested in Asia. And I remember asking, some of my mentors are like, should I sell the company? And one guy was incredible. He said, how long have you been doing this? I said, I've been doing this for like 10 years. And he was eating like noodles. He's like, wait, you've been doing this for 10 years? And I'm like, yeah. I said, oh my gosh. And he said, you got to sell it. I said, yeah, but I haven't finished. He said, you got to sell it. He said, sell it. This is the words. Get the monkey off your back, right? When you sell it, you make money. You prove to everybody that it can be done. You get the data point.
What was the size of the business, like revenue, yearly revenue?
So Food Network never disclosed the size of the revenues, but from a footprint perspective, I'm just going to make it up. It's like 25, 30 million subscribers. We had deployments in Indonesia, in Singapore, Malaysia was huge, Philippines. So many people watched us in the Philippines. We had more people watch Asian Food Channel than in Malaysia than people watching football on ESPN. Because it was food, right? So that was the size of the business. And to a cable operator, why it was important is because they always want to sell 5 or 6 or 7 channels, right? Like if you're News Corp, you sell like all the different channels. If one of your channels is a must carry, like CNN, then you can sell Turner, you can sell all the other cartoon channels, because you can say, if you don't buy my CNN, you have to buy it in a package.
Yeah.
So Asian Food Channel was that for Food Network. The moment they bought it, they rolled out 5 or 6 different channels. Yeah. Anyway, so we go into the due diligence. They give us a price. We give us a price, and we haggle the price. We come up to a price. Long story short, we sold the company, and this is the best story, which is money is already in escrow account, right? Somewhere in Ohio, right? Wells Fargo, right?
Yeah.
Food Network management team has come down to Singapore. We've signed the documents, right? Introduced to everybody, we are now part of this big network.
Yeah.
Money's still not here. Right? It was like Friday, right? So meeting on Friday. My shareholders like, where's the money? It's in escrow. Food Network says, we sent it to you. Monday, still no money, because actually it takes a long time. You got to put it in escrow. You got to check everything. And there's like some person in America, middle America, who has half day off. So was only going to complete the transaction on Tuesday. And when my lawyers told me this, I'm like, are you kidding me? There is like this one person in America who, if she presses the button, all the shareholders get the money. So I said, please, just press the button. Can you please call them? So Tuesday, still no money because they wake up early. And I still remember me and my business partner, we went for a foot massage. So I believe in this sort of creative ideas. Like if you cannot think of something, like you're here, go for a walk, go buy some shoes. For us, foot massage. And so we were sitting down, anyway, everything's done. And I pull out my laptop, right? And I put in my dongle. This was like 2013. And I check my DBS account. Because if the money comes into my account, it goes into all the shareholder accounts. And then when I logged in, this like bigger number, it looks like an Excel spreadsheet mistake appears. And you go like, oh, wow. So that's first feeling of actually having money. It's not like someone gives you like US dollars, like a wraps. You just see like a number on the screen. You're like, oh. And I show it to my business partner. And then she goes, oh. And then we both, we went to sleep.
Enjoy massage now.
And then the crazy thing is, next day or the day after, had the worst like flu. Like because after the stress, have you ever experienced it?
Yeah.
Had the worst flu. And I was like shivering, fever, and I was under the covers, right? And I was feeling terrible. And all I could think was, I'm rich, but I feel like shit. And then I realized like, I don't care what money you have in your bank account. If your relationships are not good, if your family is not good, if your health is not good, these things cannot be just because you have money. You can use the money to fix it or get there. You hire a trainer. I have a trainer now. Eat better food. But if you don't do that, you're not going to get there. So that was the aha moment.
So you sold it for 65, yeah?
65 US.
Did you disclose how much you get? What part?
With minority stake, right?
Yeah.
So you can see roughly, right?
Yeah.
Enough to be dangerous, not enough to retire. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you can retire. I mean, technically.
It's very interesting. It's very interesting. If you have $1 million, you should be thinking about how to make $10 million. If you have $10 million, you should be thinking how to make $100 million. If you have $100 million, you should be thinking about how to make $1 billion. If you have $1 million, don't try to think how to make billion. Right? So, you have 1 million, then you get 10. And so, when we started the firm, we want to get to a point where we run $1 billion. We're almost there. And if I'm lucky, we have other financial objectives. And then you can do philanthropy, you can do a lot of things. So money is about amplification of energy. I really believe this. Like if you're like in your heart, if you're a generous person, when you have money, you do generous things. If you're worried of money and you always like hold on to it, you'll never spend a penny. If you always want to show people that you're an incredible human being or higher in status, what do you think you're going to do, right? You're going to use it to buy Louis Vuitton bags and watches and stuff like that. So they always say money changes people. Money doesn't change people. Money reveals your true character.
Like alcohol. If you're depressed, you're going to be more depressed.
That's true.
If you're high, you're going to be more.
You go high. Amplification methodology. And it's a stored form of energy. Money is a stored form of energy. Today, I pay you money, you do something. Money is just stored form of energy, very efficient storage of energy. How you use the energy is exactly how people can see your true heart. So I tell you a story. So I actually didn't change very much after I sold Asian Food Channel. I still lived in a black and white apartment in Woking Road. I bought like really fancy laptop.
What was your biggest purchase after you?
That's right. So when you suddenly come into money, it is a very natural temptation to spend something big, right? A friend of mine told me, she said, this itch is there. Try to find something that's not too expensive, but make sure you have that feeling. I said, okay. So I had to buy a new MacBook, right? So I went on the website and I maxed everything out. I was like, 1 terabyte. I was like, everything. And then, I think it was like $5,000 when it shouldn't be like 1,500. And I pressed it and I was like, yeah. And I got that feeling. I never bought like fast car until 2 years later. My 40th birthday, my wife was like, go buy yourself like a fast car. So I bought like an old Porsche. But what happened was I was back in the ecosystem trying to do deals and trying to do like angel investments. I hadn't got the fund yet. And nobody believed I made money, right? Because Food Network didn't say anything. So I would say, give me a business plan. And And then the day I bought the Porsche and I drove it to Block 71, I was like, oh, he's got money. And then, so actually status signaling is quite important. I understand that. But to me, it was more so about, oh my God, after 10 years, I got this money and it's not the biggest amount, but it's a big amount. How am I going to use it to leverage it to do even more impactful things? So it wasn't for a time to retire. It was a time to really activate and move to the next thing. And I thought being a venture capitalist, you got a fighting chance of really making good money. Yeah.
Did you have any gap after you exited? Like, did you?
Yes.
Did
Yes.
it give you some time?
I had 6 months.
What did you do during this 6 months?
I took a round the world trip. So my wife never been to America, like truly like big, the whole gap, and she's a fan of Sex and the City, so we went to New York. And Daniel Boulud is a chef that I'm very close to because of the TV channel, so we ate there, and then we went to French Laundry, and then we came back. But honestly, I couldn't sit still, and then my wife said, like, just keep going, right? You know, you can't retire. It's too early. I was like 39 years old. Yeah.
Did you have this internal confidence that you would make it eventually? Give me some time. Give me more time. I'll make it.
I want to say yes, you know, but it's easy to just say, oh, yes, Max, absolutely. I'm that kind of guy, right? I think the advice I give to entrepreneurs now is that you've got to be both good, but you also got to be lucky. This is important. Napoleon always believed his generals needed to be lucky. But if you do that thing and you take that risk 4 or 5 times, one time you will be lucky. One time everything will come together. One time everything. And in the case of me, after doing 2 or 3 things, suddenly people wanted to buy food channels, suddenly more than one bidder, suddenly somebody wants to buy it, and I got my exit. I think now, because it happened to me, I believe it. When you're going through it, you never believe it. It's important to have people around you who tell you it can be done and maybe you will do it this time. And so as a venture capitalist, I'm different, right? I've gone through this, and sometimes entrepreneurs like, oh my God, Max, you know, I'm almost back up. Really? Why don't you do this, do that, do this, do that, do this, do that? You go, oh. I said, just keep going. I very famously, and I tried to like trigger emotions to people. I had like one team of people who were very good looking guys, right? Like management consultants, they're like very smart, and they were doing this business, and then big international giant comes in and challenges them, and they had to pivot the business. And we were at the board meeting, and you know, clearly they needed to go away and think of a pivot. So I said, I'm stopping this board meeting. I say, I'm stopping it. The current strategy doesn't work. Go sit on a mountain, go to Bali 3 days, go figure it out. Get yourself out of the situation. And I said to him, I said, you're too young, you're too smart, and you're too good looking to fail. You're too good looking. Look at you guys, all you guys. Like, you are like poster boy of Singapore tech ecosystem. You're too good looking to fail. And the guy's like, what? I said, yeah, no. I said, just go. You guys can do it. But if you can't do it, nobody can do it. So I always tell them, you're too young, too smart, too good looking. Elicits an emotional reaction. Emotions are very critical. It creates emotional resolve, then creates the tenacity, the resilience to actually execute.
The lowest moment you told me, what was the best moment, the happiest moment?
After the proceeds came in, we had a lot of share options with our team members. And you know, if you're an engineer at Asian Food, you don't really know. Every time I say, I give you this share option, I give you the share, you don't really know what it looks like. So I call in a guy and I go, here's a check for $65,000, right? And this is like editor, right? He's an editor, right? So he doesn't get paid $65,000 a year in those days. And he's like, why are you giving me this check? I said, that's your share options. He said, what are share options? It's in your contract. Here, I told you, if we sell the company, you'll get a piece of it. Here's the piece. More people cried that day than, you know, I've ever experienced. And he used it to pay off his mother's mortgage, HDB mortgage. Yeah, that was an incredible moment. Because you call people at one end, because it's confidential, and you say, here's your check. So what is this? So I told you, we sell the company, you'll get a piece. That was great. That was a good moment. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. I can imagine. It's super satisfying. I remember like when I was like with my previous business in 2020, we had like a huge spike when COVID started, huge spike of sales for our agency business. And I remember like we made, like it was my, in 1 month I made 100K, like
Wow.
120K
Yeah.
SGD profit. And then my CEO, he also made like decent money, like 20K or something. And it was super satisfying for me
Yeah.
that he made this money.
Yeah.
For me as well, like me, of course, yeah. But for him, it's like, wow.
But think about it, not everybody thinks like that,
Mm.
right? If you view the world as a cruel place, you'll be very upset. Oh, I promised this guy the money, I got to give it to him. Here, take the money, go. It's very different, right?
Yeah.
And people can see your heart. People can see the true energy of who you are. I don't care. Like you can try and hide it. Maybe you'll hide it for a while, but people can see your true heart.
When you see this, the teams, the companies you potentially could invest, what's the biggest like observations that you see? Okay, all these guys will be successful, all these guys maybe not.
How can you tell if somebody's going to be a good entrepreneurial team, right? Is that the question?
Okay, let's put it this way. Maybe they will not succeed in the current business, but you want to invest. You want to help them. They have something. They have potential.
Okay, yeah. No, that's true, right? So I agree with you. Just because you invest in a great team doesn't mean that guy is going to be successful. You can be hit by a tsunami. Conversely, you can be like, okay team, but just right place, right time, like crypto, blah, blah, and you do well, right? So that's why I always say you need luck as well as skills. So, but if you are able to always consistently find people who have that it factor, you'll get more lucky than others, right? As an investor. So I'll give you a perspective. So I thought about it. I meet like 5 entrepreneurs a week and really meet them like one-on-one. Like today I already did 2. So over 10 years, if my math is correct, I met like 2,500 entrepreneurs. Think about it, right? But really like one-on-one, sit down like this and really think about it. So the things I look out for are really 4 characteristics. One is first principle thinker, right? Really like what is the assumption I'm trying to fix? Why am I fixing it? Why is it broken? Why I think because of AI, because of crypto, because of mobile phone. That first principle thinking. Number 2 is you have to be resilient. Remember we were talking about your background, Max, and how you got to Singapore. And I said, I like you, why? Because you're resilient, right? I know that you didn't go to like, the world didn't hand you. You made it here because of who you are. I get very worried if somebody always is like top performer all their life and never experience so that's resilience. If you have first principle thinking and you're resilient, you create what I call an unreasonable mindset. But then what happens is if you don't listen to anybody, if you don't know how to be humble, which I would argue like when I was doing my business, it was very hard to do that. And if you're not big-hearted or you don't know how to empower the best people to follow you on the mission, then you will do it alone and you will not succeed, right? And I see a lot of people, they've got the first 2, but they don't have number 3 and number 4. If you have number 3 and number 4, you become an incredible entrepreneur. I call that the self-awareness and the team leadership. You move from unreasonable mindset to unreasonable execution. You start catching a rocket with a pair of steel chopsticks, right? And then you have a track record. So that the next time you do it, people go, look, man, he did that, he'll do that again. So it's important because I see a lot of entrepreneurs and sometimes they have the best CVs. They have the best PowerPoint presentation. And a lot of people smart people, influential people have given them funding. But I always ask the question, is that person really that resilient? When they finally get hit with adversity, can they survive? Do they listen well? And are they good to their team? Are they generous? And so sometimes I see people make investments into wrong teams because of that, right? Because they just look like they've got all the check boxes. And I'm very different and invested that way. I look for the other side, like the things that not are measured by university degrees or LinkedIn CV. It's very important. It's very important. Yeah.
What's your biggest principles in relationships with people?
Be generous, right? And I don't mean like money generous, like be generous in truly, if you can help somebody, right? I'm famous for after meeting me as a venture capitalist, I'll go like, we haven't made a decision, but you should really talk to the other guy there. And he's like, why are you referring me to another venture capitalist? I'm like, look, until we actually give you the money, we're the worst venture capitalists. Go talk to somebody else. Be generous. I think this is a very important thing. Be vulnerable. Many business leaders don't realize how powerful vulnerability is as a superpower. What do I mean by that? you're in a position of power. You have to make decisions. By definition, not everyone's going to have to agree to the decision. You say yes to this, someone will say no. If you're vulnerable and you say, hey, you know what? I hear you, I understand you, and I'm sorry, but this is what I can do. This is my best decision I can make right now. And I have to make the decision because it's my job, but I'm very open to feedback. And actually, the other time I made the decision was incorrect, and you could see like we managed to fix it. Like a lot of people think that that's a negative thing. I think that's a superpower. So within my office, right, I am very famous for not being too detail oriented, always missing meetings. Like even today, the guys are waiting downstairs, and I will tell my team members like, okay, guys, today Hian's in a bad mood. I just want to let you know, I'm in a bad mood. Like, it's not you, it's me. I'm going to try and get out of the bad mood. So if I am like pissy, right, it's not you. And it creates loyalty. I think that's very important because that's what people want. People want to know that you're human, you're trying your best, you know your insecurities, and you're vulnerable.
Yeah.
I think those are the two. The rest of it is, of course, table stakes, but being generous and being vulnerable are things that I found very important in my life.
That's amazing. I think we discussed like your YouTube channel before. So you have this podcast. We'll put the link in the description.
Yeah.
But you're also like thinking to go next step and like do some vlogs as a venture capitalist, life, business/life. And I think because of your personality, very transparent about your emotions as well. It will resonate.
You're the expert. You better tell me whether, like...
No, for sure. Like last time we talked about it, and I see like you have this potential to be like very interesting for people because of your, not only solely because of your business achievements, but because your personality.
I don't know how to hide things very well. Like it's just my personality. But yeah, that's my current construct. I really believe in that. Yeah.
Okay, so when are you launching the new format?
You gotta help me. Yeah. I got the raw video, so I just went down to Jakarta. I launched the new electric motorcycle, great team, and we did the videographer. So you gotta help me. You gotta give me advice. You see, like here's the other thing, right? Like I thought to myself, like I started a TV channel, big channel, right? Max, you're like incredible. Like when I first met you, I'm like, this guy, I could learn from this guy. Can you imagine, like if I had this other mental attitude? I used to be TV channel boss. And this YouTube.
I know.
And so when the world changes, you gotta change, that's number one. But number two is if you don't practice it, you're never gonna learn it. So I'm gonna get my GoPro 360, I'm just gonna do it. If it's shit content and nobody watches it, that's fine. But I think you gotta really put yourself out there and you gotta really do it. And I hope that more Singaporeans and more people in the world take that approach, right? You just gotta do it. And then you should keep it on YouTube and people go like, oh my God, you're like so good. I'm like, really? Look at the first video I did. Again, vulnerability. See the journey. See, it can be done. Do it. Do it.
Yeah, but I can see it. You're very receptive. Like when I share some knowledge about YouTube last time.
Yeah.
Because you had this like huge TV channel and you're still very receptive. You understand that
It doesn't work anymore.
Yeah, you could.
Cable doesn't work anymore, right? Stupidity, the definition of stupidity is to do the same thing and expect a different result. Challenge the assumption. First principles thinking, move forward.
By the way, if someone wants to reach out to you, what would be the right way to reach out with some projects or something? LinkedIn?
LinkedIn, I always check and I always post. Instagram, Hian Can Cook. Yeah, but you can always find me. Yeah, I'm always available. I try not to hide. If you LinkedIn me, I will try my best to reply.
Cool.
Even if it's 5 words, I will.
Yeah, we'll put all the links to Hian in the description. What's the meaning of life for you?
I've been doing open space for 10 years. I think the first thing is always challenge what your current meaning of life is. And so my meaning of life, and this is why now I'm coming out here and you never heard from me for like 10 years, is I think I spent 10 years really understanding how to be a venture capitalist. And I want to put it out there. I want to be more generous if possible. And I know that we are not here forever. So one of the resistance that I've been thinking about is, should I start this journey now? Should I really put myself out there? Should I maybe write a book or something like that? And sometimes you think like, oh, but you're still young. You should do it. But you know what? If you think you've got something to say, do it, so that you leave it for the next generation. So many people have asked me my story, like, oh, what did you do Asian food channel? How to be a good entrepreneur? Even today, like 5 people on LinkedIn said things. I just go like, so sorry, I have no time to meet you, but please start by watching the Unreasonable podcast and listen to my content. So I think the meaning of life now is broadly to be in a position where I don't have to worry about commercial things, but to generally align what I do commercially with a strong emphasis on giving back. Giving back to whatever, universe, if I can just do it. And it's not actually for any other reason other than the fact that I really understand that for some reason a lot of things have gone right in my life, and I feel like I need to really try and add something to the world above and beyond being a venture capitalist, something like that.